What happens when the people who save lives in the wilderness start disappearing themselves? People trained to survive anything, people who know every trail and every warning sign. The search and rescue teams in this story operated in the North Cascades of Washington. They thought they knew these mountains, but some parts of the wilderness don't want to be known. Local rangers say there are areas in the Cascades where rescue teams won't go anymore, and the reason why has been buried in incident reports for decades. Listen to this story because what happened to these teams is far beyond terrifying. Welcome to Unexplained Accounts, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. I'm writing this because I don't know who else to tell. I was part of a search and rescue team in the North Cascades, and I'm one of the only ones left. My name's not important, but I've been doing SR work for 12 years, operating out of the Marble Mount Station just outside North Cascades National Park. My partner Chris and I moved to Washington in 2012, both of us wanting to get away from city work and do something that mattered. We thought we'd found it. The mountains were beautiful, the work was hard but rewarding, and we were good at it. I'd pulled people out of worse situations than most could imagine. Broken legs at 6,000 feet, hypothermia cases in February storms, hikers who'd been lost for days. We had a 96% success rate on our team. People got lost in the mountains all the time, but we brought them home. That changed in March 2024. The North Cascades aren't like other mountain ranges. The terrain is brutal, steep valleys cut by glacial rivers, old growth forest so thick you can't see 20 feet in any direction, and weather that turns violent without warning. But we knew it. Every trail, every peak, every drainage. We'd trained there for years. When the first team went missing, I thought it was a freak accident. Equipment failure, maybe a fall. It happens. But Chris said something felt wrong from the start. She'd worked with the missing team, knew them personally. They were experienced, careful. They didn't make mistakes. The call came in on March 14th. Just after the spring thaw. A 4-person SAR team had gone out for routine trail assessment near Cascade Pass. Standard stuff we did every year after winter. They were supposed to radio in every 2 hours. Dispatch logged their last transmission at 2:47 p.m., nothing after that. By the time we got the call 36 hours later, the weather window was closing. Our team deployed at dawn the next morning, 8 of us total, following their planned route. About 3 miles in, we found their first radio. It was sitting on a flat rock beside the trail, turned off, battery still good. A 1/4 mile further, we found the rest of their equipment. GPS units, packs, first aid kits, even their jackets, everything, lined up in a neat row beside a creek crossing, like someone had arranged them for inventory. But no footprints, no signs of struggle, no blood. We searched for 3 days and found nothing else. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Another team, 6 people this time, disappeared during a recovery operation near Thunder Creek. Same area, same silence on the radios. We were sent back in, and this time I noticed things I'd missed before. The trees felt wrong. I know that sounds stupid. But the forest around that drainage didn't move like it should. No wind in the branches, no birds, just heavy stillness that made my ears ring. We found their camp on the second day. Tents still standing, gear intact, a pot of water still sitting on a cold camp stove. Their boots were lined up outside one tent, 6 pairs, perfectly spaced. Chris walked the perimeter and found something that made her stop cold. Footprints in the soft mud near the creek, dozens of them, but they didn't match anything I'd seen before. Human-shaped, but wrong. Too narrow at the heel, too deep for the size, like whatever made them was heavier than it should be. I measured one, 14 inches long, pressed nearly 4 inches into the mud. A person that size wouldn't sink that deep, not in spring mud. I took photos with my phone, close-ups of the prints and the camp. When I checked them that night back at the station, most came out completely black. Only 2 showed anything, and in both, there was a dark shape at the edge of the frame that I hadn't seen when I took them. Chris said we shouldn't go back there. She'd been quiet the whole hike out, wouldn't explain why until we got to the truck. Then she told me that when she'd walked to the north side of camp, she'd felt something watching her. Not animal watching, not human watching, something else. She said the air got cold, and she heard something that sounded like her name whispered from the tree line. She's not the type to spook easy, but her hands were shaking when she told me. We didn't find the second team either. That night, back at the station, I started asking questions. The veteran rangers didn't want to talk about it. They'd exchange looks, change the subject, find reasons to leave the room. Finally, an older guy named Harding, who'd been with the Park Service since the 1980s, pulled me aside. He said if I really wanted to know, there were old incident reports in the archive room, but I should think carefully about whether I actually wanted to read them. I went down there after my shift. The files went back to 1957 when the park was first established. What I found made my hands go cold. Disappearances in that same drainage, going back decades. 1973, a survey crew. 1981, 2 rangers. 1989, a geological team. 2007, a solo hiker whose case went cold. Every report had the same details. Equipment found, no bodies recovered, search suspended after extensive efforts. In the 1973 case, the incident commander had written in the margin, "Recommend closure of northern sector, conditions unsuitable for personnel safety." It had been crossed out and initialed by someone higher up. Chris found me around midnight, still reading. She'd been doing research too on her phone. She showed me forum posts from climbers and backpackers, going back years. Stories about voices calling from the woods, feeling watched, finding arranged piles of gear with no explanation. One post from 2019 mentioned an abandoned fire lookout tower deep in the backcountry, past Thunder Creek, where hikers reported seeing lights at night, even though the tower had been decommissioned since 1965. The next morning, Harding called me into his office. He looked tired, older than usual. He said people go missing in the mountains. That's just the reality of wilderness work. But there are places where the odds change, places where experience doesn't matter. Before I left, he looked at me hard and said, "If you hear someone calling your name from off-trail, don't answer. Don't even acknowledge you heard it." 3 days later, we were back out there. A solo climber had activated his emergency beacon near El Dorado Peak, and our team was the closest. 6 of us went in, including Chris and 2 newer members who hadn't been part of the previous searches. The weather was clear, textbook conditions. We made good time on the established trail, reached the coordinates by early afternoon, found the climber with a broken ankle, stable, coherent. Standard extraction. We were rigging the litter when the radios started acting up. At first it was just static, normal interference from the ridge line. Then the static cleared and we heard voices. Not radio chatter, actual voices, distant but distinct, coming through every handset at once. Someone was calling names. My name, Chris's name, names of people on our team. The voices were too clear for atmospheric skip, too distant to be anyone nearby. I checked the channel, confirmed we were on our frequency. The voices kept calling, patient and rhythmic, like they had all the time in the world. Chris grabbed my arm. She heard it too. So did Martinez, one of the newer guys. He went pale and said his wife's name had just come through his radio. His wife was in Seattle. The temperature dropped, sudden and sharp, maybe 15 degrees in under a minute. My breath came out in clouds, even though it was nearly 60 degrees when we'd started the hike. The climber we were extracting said, "What's wrong with the light?" I looked up. The sun was still shining, but the shadows under the trees had gone dark, thick, like they weren't reflecting light right. Something moved between the trees about 40 yards upslope. Too tall for a person, too narrow, sliding between the trunks without breaking branches. I stopped. Chris tightened her grip on my arm. The voices on the radio cut off mid-word, and everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind where even the insects stop. We got the climber out fast, nobody speaking, everyone moving at double pace. When we reached the trailhead just before dark, Martinez turned in his resignation that night, said his wife heard someone outside their house while we were on the mountain, someone calling his name. Sorry for the quick interruption. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being part of Unexplained Accounts. Lately, the channel hasn't been shown as much across this platform, so if you're enjoying this story, please take a second to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support really helps new listeners discover these stories and keeps the channel going strong. Now, let's get back to this story. The next morning, I went back alone. Chris begged me not to go. She said whatever was out there, we weren't equipped to handle it, that going back wouldn't change anything. But I needed to see that fire lookout tower Harding had mentioned. I needed something concrete, something that made sense. I told her I'd be back by nightfall, that I was just going to look. The trail to Thunder Creek was marked and maintained for the first 3 miles. After that, I followed an old ranger path that barely existed anymore, just a trace through the undergrowth. The forest got darker as I went deeper, the canopy so thick that the ground stayed in permanent twilight. About 2 miles past the maintained trail, I found stone foundations, remnants of what looked like old work camps from the 1940s, maybe earlier, collapsed structures, rusted equipment half buried in moss. I walked another 20 minutes and saw it. The fire lookout tower, leaning at a sick angle against the mountain slope. The lower supports had rotted through on one side, and the cabin at the top tilted like it might slide off at any moment. Someone had nailed boards across the stairs, but the wood was grey with age. I could see a faint trail leading to the base, recent enough that the undergrowth hadn't reclaimed it. The smell hit me first when I got close. Rot, wet wood, and something else. Something chemical and sharp like ozone after lightning. The boards across the stairs had been pried away, nails bent outward. I climbed carefully, testing each step. The cabin door was open, hanging on one hinge. Inside, the floor was scattered with debris, old furniture broken down to bones. But someone had been there recently. Candles, new ones, arranged in a circle in the center of the room. The walls were covered in markings, carved deep into the wood. Not graffiti, not random. Symbols, geometric patterns, words I couldn't read. In the far corner, I found a stack of papers weighed down with a rock. Incident reports, photocopies, going back to the 1960s. Every single one involved disappearances in this drainage. I should have left then. But I heard something deeper in the structure. A scraping sound like metal on wood, coming from below. I looked down and saw a trap door in the floor, half hidden under debris. It was open maybe 6 inches, and there was light coming from underneath, not flashlight light, pale and flickering like old lanterns. I moved closer. The smell got stronger, rot mixed with something else, copper and earth. I heard breathing, slow and wet, each exhale making a clicking sound. Then I saw movement through the gap, something pale shifting in the darkness below. The trap door flew open. It pulled itself up through the opening. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, thin in a way that looked wrong, like its joints bent at angles they shouldn't. Its skin was gray, not like a person's skin gone pale, but actually gray, with dark lines running through it like veins close to the surface. Its arms were too long, hanging past its knees. When it stood fully upright, its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its hair was long and dark, hanging in clumps over its face. It turned toward me. Its eyes were pale, almost white, but as I watched they shifted, flickering between white and dull red, like there was light behind them changing. Its mouth hung open slightly, and I could see teeth. Too many of them, crowded and uneven. It didn't blink. It just stood there, breathing that wet, clicking breath, staring at me. I backed toward the door. It took a step forward. Its movement was wrong, too smooth, like it was sliding more than walking. The floorboards didn't creak under its weight, even though they'd creaked under mine. I ran. I hit the stairs and took them 3 at a time, didn't look back until I reached the ground. It was in the doorway, watching. Its eyes were red now, fully red, and its mouth had opened wider, showing all those teeth. Then it smiled. Not like a person smiles. Its mouth just stretched, pulling back to its ears. It started down the stairs. I ran into the forest. I could hear it behind me, branches breaking, heavy footsteps that didn't match its thin frame. It didn't run. It just walked, steady and patient, like it knew I'd tire first. I made it back to my truck and locked every door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove straight to Chris's place, didn't stop, didn't call ahead. When she opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me inside without asking questions. I told her what I saw. She didn't say anything for a long time, just sat there holding my hand. Then she told me she'd seen something too, 3 days earlier, when she'd gone to check our storage unit at the station. Something tall watching her from the tree line across the parking lot. She said its eyes reflected the security lights wrong, flat and pale. The next day, I tried to file a report with Harding. He listened, face blank, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for almost a minute. Then he said, "You were alone. No witnesses, no photos that came out. You understand how that reads in an official report?" I asked if he believed me. He looked at the papers on his desk and said, "Doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is we've got protocols, and those protocols don't have a box for what you're describing." I pushed harder, asked why nobody was talking about the pattern, why we kept sending teams into an area where people disappeared. He stood up, walked to the window. "Some things don't get better when you shine a light on them, they just get harder to ignore." Before I left, he said the northern sector searches were being suspended pending a safety review, indefinite timeline. 2 days later, we got another call. Another team was overdue. This time, I knew what we'd find. 5-person team missing near Diablo Lake. Same general area, same radio silence. Our team assembled at 0600, but the mood was different. People were scared. Henderson, who'd been doing this for 15 years, asked if we could request backup from another district. Chris stayed close to me the entire briefing, wouldn't let me out of her sight. We hiked in under heavy cloud cover. The forest was too quiet again. No birds, no wind, just our footsteps and breathing. About 2 hours in, all our radios died at the same time. Not static, not low battery, just dead. We checked them, switched batteries, nothing. The GPS units were still working, but the compasses started spinning, couldn't find north. Taylor, one of our younger members, said she kept seeing someone walking parallel to us, about 50 yards off trail. Just glimpses, a tall figure moving between trees. Every time she'd point, the rest of us would look and see nothing. But I believed her, because I was seeing it too. Chris squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. We found the missing team's base camp around 1400 hours. Same setup as before, tents intact, gear arranged. But this time there was more. Inside one tent, sleeping bags were shredded, not torn like an animal would do, but cut in long, deliberate strokes. On a flat rock near the fire pit, someone had arranged the team's equipment in a perfect circle. Radios, GPS units, headlamps, even their personal items, wallets, phones, wedding rings. Henderson found boot prints leading away from camp, into the drainage where we'd lost the other teams. He said we needed to follow them. Chris said no. Her voice was shaking. Taylor backed her up, said whatever made those arrangements wasn't human. That night, back at our camp, Henderson didn't come back from the perimeter check. We found him 3 hours later. He was sitting at the base of a Douglas fir about 200 yards from camp, back against the trunk, eyes wide open. He was alive but wouldn't respond when we called his name. Chris reached him first, checked his vitals. His pulse was racing, skin cold and clammy. There were marks on his wrists, deep impressions like something had grabbed him hard enough to break capillaries. The skin was gray around the marks, bruised in a way I'd never seen before. It took 20 minutes to get him talking. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, distant. He said he'd walked the perimeter like always, marking trees with reflective tape. About halfway through, he heard someone call his name from deeper in the woods. He knew the protocol, knew he shouldn't answer, but the voice sounded exactly like his daughter. She was home in Bellingham, but he could have sworn it was her calling for help. He followed it. He said the trees got darker the further he went, even though it was only 2100 hours, and there should have been some twilight left. Then he saw it, standing in a clearing, tall and gray, watching him. He said it knew his name. It spoke his name, but not with his daughter's voice anymore, with his own voice. It said his name the way he said it, like it was learning. When he tried to run, it grabbed him. He said its hands were cold, colder than anything he'd ever felt, and when it touched him, he couldn't move, couldn't scream. It held him there for what felt like hours, just staring, breathing that wet, clicking breath. Then it let go, just opened its hands and stepped back into the trees. Henderson won't go near windows now. The dreams started that night, always the same. I'm standing in that lookout tower, looking down through the trapdoor. The pale light is flickering below, and I can hear breathing, wet and rhythmic. Then it climbs up, but this time it doesn't stop. It keeps coming toward me, and I can't move. Its eyes shift from white to red, and it opens its mouth wider than should be possible. I wake up right before it touches me. Chris said she was having nightmares too. In hers, she's walking alone on a trail, and someone keeps calling her name from different directions. Every time she turns toward the voice, the forest gets darker. She said the last 3 nights, she's woken up convinced someone was standing at the foot of the bed. We tried to take a few days off, drove to Seattle to stay with friends, get away from the mountains. It didn't help. The second night there, Chris woke up screaming that something had touched her leg. When I turned on the light, there was a mark on her ankle, a handprint, gray and perfect, like someone had pressed ash into her skin. It faded by morning, but I took a photo first. I don't sleep with the windows open anymore. Chris checks every lock 3 times before bed. We both wake up at the smallest sounds. Last week, I was sitting on our porch and saw something tall and thin standing at the edge of the parking lot near the tree line. When I stood up to look closer, it stepped back into the shadows. But distance didn't matter. Whatever it was, it followed us. 3 weeks after the last incident, I got a call. Harding. His voice was tight, controlled in a way that told me something was wrong. He said a solo researcher, a wildlife biologist working on a lynx study, had missed 2 check-in calls. Her last known position was near that fire lookout tower. He needed someone who knew the area. He said he wouldn't ask if there was anyone else. Chris heard me on the phone. When I hung up, she was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. She said I wasn't going. I told her I had to, that someone was out there. She said someone was always out there. That's how it worked. That's how it kept getting more of us. I packed anyway. She watched me load my pack, not saying anything, just shaking her head. Before I left, she grabbed my arm and said, "You know this is a mistake." I knew. I knew it in my bones, in the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking while I checked my gear. But I couldn't explain why I still had to go. Maybe I thought if I faced it again, understood what it was, I could make it stop. The drive to the trailhead took 90 minutes. The closer I got to the mountains, the darker the sky became, even though the weather report showed clear conditions. By the time I parked, heavy clouds had rolled in, sitting low against the peaks. The forest felt different before I even stepped onto the trail. Darker somehow, even in full daylight. The temperature was at least 10 degrees colder than it should have been for late spring. I started hiking at 1400 hours. 20 minutes in, I realized I hadn't heard a single bird. By the time I reached the drainage, I knew this was a trap. I heard it before I saw it. That wet, clicking breath echoing through the trees. I was maybe half a mile from the lookout tower, following what I thought was the researcher's trail. The GPS coordinates put her last known position near that drainage. But the coordinates were wrong, or I was being led there. Either way, I knew what was waiting. The forest opened into a small clearing. In the center stood the researcher's tent, collapsed on one side. Her pack was outside, contents scattered in a perfect circle. Radio, water bottles, field notes, all arranged like an offering. And standing at the far edge of the clearing was the thing from the tower. It was taller than I remembered. Maybe 8 feet, impossibly thin, its gray skin stretched tight over bones that moved wrong beneath. Its arms hung down past its knees, fingers too long, ending in what looked like blackened nails. Its hair was matted, hanging in thick ropes across its face. When it saw me, its head tilted slowly to one side, too far, like its neck had extra joints. Its eyes were white at first, then shifted to that dull red. Its mouth opened, showing all those crowded teeth, and it made a sound. My name. It said my name in my own voice, exactly how I sound, like it had been practicing. I backed toward the tree line. It took a step forward, and the movement was all wrong. Too smooth, like it was gliding over the ground instead of walking. I could see its chest now, torn open at some point and healed wrong. Gray flesh puckered and twisted. Dark lines ran through its skin, pulsing faintly. It spoke again. "Stay." The voice was deeper this time, rough like it hurt to form the word. Then it smiled, lips pulling back past where they should stop, stretching toward its ears. I ran. It followed, moving fast now, branches cracking behind me. I could hear it breathing, that wet clicking getting closer. When I reached the main trail, I risked a look back. It was there, maybe 20 yards away, walking steadily, eyes locked on mine. It wasn't running. It didn't need to. It knew these woods better than I did. I don't work for search and rescue anymore. Neither does Chris. We quit 2 weeks after that last incident. Harding didn't try to stop us, just signed the paperwork and said he understood. I asked him how many others had left. He said enough, that they're having trouble staffing operations. 3 more teams have transferred to other districts since March. We moved to Spokane, as far from the Cascades as we could get while staying in Washington. Chris works dispatch now for City Fire Department. I took a job doing logistics for a medical supply company. Normal work, no mountains, no radios cutting out in the middle of nowhere. But it didn't matter. I don't sleep much. Sometimes I wake up around 3 a.m. and think I hear that wet, clicking breath outside the window. Chris still has the nightmares. She wakes up screaming that someone's calling her name. Last week, She found a handprint on the bathroom mirror, gray and perfect, even though we'd been alone in the apartment all night. I called Harding last month, asked if the disappearances had stopped. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said another team went missing in September. Same area, same circumstances. The Park Service is calling it a series of unfortunate accidents. Equipment failure, difficult terrain, operator error. They've reclassified the northern sector as high risk, but they haven't closed it. People still go in. I don't think it was a cult. I don't think it's something that was summoned and stayed. I think it's always been there, in those mountains, and we just kept sending people into its territory. Maybe the old rangers knew. Maybe that's why they didn't talk about it. Sometimes late at night, I see something tall and thin standing in the parking lot across from our building. When I blink, it's gone. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide.